Her name echoes through history like a lament, a queen, a beauty, a martyr, a tragic figure caught in the unforgiving crosscurrents of power, faith, and passion. Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots, remains one of history's most compelling and controversial monarchs. Was she a naive victim of ruthless men and political machinations, or a cunning schemer whose ambition ultimately led to her downfall? Her life reads like a Shakespearean tragedy. Crowned queen as an infant, Queen of France at 16, widow at 18, then plunged into the treacherous waters of Scottish politics, followed by 19 years of imprisonment, and finally, execution by her own cousin. I am Dr. Amy Boyington, and today we journey through the tumultuous life of Mary, Queen of Scots, exploring her loves, her losses, her fierce rivalries, and the enduring legacy of a woman whose life story continues to fascinate and divide. Mary Stuart's destiny was thrust upon her mere days after her birth. Born on the 8th of December 1542 at Linlithgow Palace, she became Queen of Scots at just 6 days old upon the death of her father, King James V of Scotland. Scotland, a fiercely independent nation, now faced the daunting task of being ruled by an infant queen. In a turbulent era defined by religious strife and dynastic ambition, Mary's childhood was anything but ordinary. Her mother, Mary of Guise, ruled the kingdom as Queen Regent on behalf of her daughter from 1554 until her death in 1560. To protect Mary from the aggressive courtship of England's King Henry VIII, a period known as the Rough Wooing, and to solidify the old alliance with France, Mary was sent at the tender age of 5 to the glittering, sophisticated French court. Here she was raised alongside the children of King Henri II and Catherine de' Medici, receiving an education befitting a future queen. She excelled, learning French, Latin, Greek, Italian, and Spanish, as well as music, needlework, and horsemanship or horsewomanship. Graceful and intelligent, Mary became a beloved figure, known for her charm and vivacity. She was often described as being exceptionally pretty and intelligent, radiating a natural elegance and joy that made her a favourite among the French royal children and earned her the affectionate nickname the Little Queen of Scots. Her early appearance already hinted at the beauty that she would become. On April the 24th, 1558, at just 15 years old, Mary married the Dauphin of France, Francis, in a lavish ceremony at Notre Dame Cathedral. A year later, though, with the sudden death of Henri II, Mary became Queen Consort of France as well as of Scotland. She was now the queen of two nations while still a teenager. For a brief, shining period, Mary seemed to have it all. However, this golden era was short-lived. In December of 1560, the frail Francis died, leaving Mary a widow at the young age of 18. With her mother, Mary of Guise, also recently deceased, Mary was now bereft of both husband and mother. Her French reign abruptly ended. The call of her turbulent homeland beckoned, and her mother-in-law or ex-mother-in-law, Catherine de' Medici, wanted her long gone. Scotland, a land she barely remembered, and one vastly different from the Catholic haven of France, was waiting for her. In August of 1561, despite warnings from her French relatives, Mary returned to Scotland. She sailed into shore, a young, elegant Catholic queen stepping onto the shores of a nation transformed by the Protestant Reformation. The firebrand preacher John Knox and his followers had reshaped the religious landscape, viewing Mary, the Catholic monarch, with deep suspicion. Mary faced an immediate immense challenge. Her half-brother Lord James Stuart, later Earl of Moray, initially acted as her chief advisor, attempting to bridge the religious divide. Mary, for her part, adopted a policy of relative religious toleration, allowing Protestantism to be the official religion of Scotland, whilst insisting on her own right to worship privately as a Catholic. This pragmatic approach initially earned her some grudging respect, and she displayed surprising political acumen, charming many who met her. Yet underlying tensions simmered. Knox famously railed against her idolatry and her monstrous regiment of women. Meanwhile, the English Queen Elizabeth I viewed her with great suspicion. Mary's claim to the English throne was a central, inescapable factor throughout her entire life and the root cause of her tragic conflict with Elizabeth I. Her claim stemmed directly from her lineage. She was the granddaughter of Margaret Tudor, who was King Henry VIII's elder sister. This made Mary a legitimate direct descendant of Henry VII and, crucially for many, a staunch Catholic. In the eyes of many European Catholics, Elizabeth I was illegitimate due to her parents' annulled marriage and the Anglican Church's separation from Rome. Therefore, for Catholics, Mary was seen as the rightful Queen of England. This powerful yet perilous claim made her a constant beacon of hope for English Catholics and a formidable existential threat to Elizabeth's Protestant reign. Meanwhile, back in Scotland, pressure mounted for Mary to remarry and produce an heir to secure the Stuart line. Her personal life, increasingly entwined with matters of state, was about to plunge into a tragic spiral, demonstrating her unfortunate tendency to prioritise personal affection above political prudence. Her choice for a second husband would prove to be her undoing. After rejecting several foreign suitors, Mary chose to marry her first cousin, Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, in July of 1565. He was a tall, handsome English Catholic with a strong claim to the English throne through his own Tudor lineage, making any children born of their union an even more formidable claimant to Elizabeth I's crown. Mary was undeniably infatuated with Lord Darnley, reportedly calling him the long lad and ignoring the warnings of her advisers and the furious objections of Elizabeth I, who saw the marriage as a direct threat. Initially, Mary was deeply in love. She bestowed upon her new husband the title of King Consort. However, Darnley proved to be a vain, arrogant, and dissolute young man, quickly demanding more power, specifically the title of the Crown Matrimonial, which would make him a co-sovereign of Scotland with the right to keep the Scottish throne for himself, even if he outlived Mary. Mary refused this, and she became increasingly disillusioned by his behaviour and his growing alcoholism. Their marriage rapidly deteriorated into bitter animosity. Darnley grew intensely jealous of Mary's close bond with her foreign private secretary, David Rizzio, an Italian musician who had become her trusted confidant and political advisor. Driven by paranoia and resentment and manipulated by a faction of Protestant nobles who wished to weaken Mary's power, Darnley orchestrated a brutal act of terror. On the 9th of March 1566, a heavily pregnant Mary was happily eating her supper in Holyrood Palace when all of a sudden Darnley, along with his armed conspirators, burst into her private chamber. They seized Rizzio, dragging him from behind the Queen's skirts and savagely murdering him, stabbing him 56 times, leaving his bloodstains on the floor. Mary was forced to watch this horrific spectacle, a direct assault on her authority and her personal safety. This traumatic event irrevocably shattered any remaining affection for Darnley and solidified her determination to rid herself of him. 3 months later, Mary gave birth to their son, James, the future James VI of Scotland and James I of England. But the child did nothing to reconcile the parents. The stage was set for an even greater tragedy. The tension between Mary and Darnley reached its terrifying climax in February of 1567. Darnley, recovering from an illness, possibly syphilis or smallpox, was staying at Kirkerfield, a house just outside Edinburgh. In the early hours of February the 10th, a massive explosion ripped through the house. Darnley's body was found in the garden nearby, seemingly uninjured by the blast, but apparently dead. He had been smothered. The mystery of Kirkerfield immediately cast a dark shadow over Mary. While the main suspect was James Hepburn, the 4th Earl of Bothwell, a powerful, ambitious nobleman who had become Mary's staunch supporter and increasingly her lover, public suspicion also fell heavily on the Queen. Bothwell was quickly brought to trial, but acquitted, likely due to intimidation and lack of concrete evidence. Elizabeth I was horrified watching from England, and she cautioned Mary from afar, writing, "I should ill fulfil the office of a faithful cousin or an affectionate friend if I did not tell you what all the world is thinking. Men say that instead of seizing the murderers, you are looking through your fingers while they escape." The scandal reached its peak with Mary's subsequent actions. Just 3 months after Darnley's murder, in April of 1567, Mary was controversially abducted by Bothwell while returning to Edinburgh. Some historians believe that this was a staged event, a consensual act designed to force her hand. Others believe that it was against her will and that Mary was raped at Dunbar Castle, forcing her to marry him. Mary and Bothwell, her third husband, were married on May the 15th, just days after Bothwell's dubious acquittal. This hasty marriage to a man widely believed to be Darnley's murderer proved to be a catastrophic miscalculation. It alienated her remaining supporters, fueled outrage across Scotland and Europe, and solidified the image of Mary as an adulteress and a murderess. The Protestant lords, already resentful of her power and suspicious of her Catholic faith, used this as the pretext for their rebellion. At Carberry Hill in June of 1567, Mary's forces faced the rebel lords. Deserted by many of her own troops, Mary surrendered and was subsequently imprisoned at Lochleven Castle, a fortress on an island. And it is here, while she was imprisoned and under immense pressure, that she was forced to abdicate her throne in favour of her 1-year-old son, James VI. Her tumultuous reign in Scotland had ended in disgrace and imprisonment, but her story was far from over. Mary was just 24 years old at this point in time, and yet she had experienced and witnessed so many things, and her life really was far from over. In May of 1568, so the following year, Mary miraculously escaped from Lochleven Castle. After a final crushing defeat at the Battle of Langside, she made the fateful decision to flee south, seeking refuge and aid from her kinswoman, Queen Elizabeth I of England. It was a choice that would determine the rest of Mary's life and ultimately her death. Elizabeth faced an immense dilemma. Mary was her cousin, a legitimate anointed queen, and as a great-granddaughter of Henry VII, a direct claimant to the English throne. To restore Mary to her own throne would risk sparking a Catholic uprising in England and destabilising Elizabeth's own Protestant rule. To simply release her would empower a dangerous rival. To execute her would be an unprecedented act against a fellow monarch. So Elizabeth chose a middle path. Mary would be held in captivity. And for the next 19 years, Mary was an unwilling guest in various English castles and manor houses, including Bolton, Tutbury, Sheffield, and finally Fotheringhay, always under the watchful eye of Protestant noblemen like George Talbot, Earl of Shrewsbury. While she was not kept in a dungeon, her movements were severely restricted, her correspondence monitored, and her access to the outside world tightly controlled. During her nearly 2 decades of captivity in England, Mary found various ways to occupy her time, often with activities befitting her royal status, albeit within confined limits. Despite the continuous political machinations surrounding her, her daily life involved a blend of intellectual pursuits, domestic hobbies, and attempts to maintain some semblance of a royal court. A significant portion of her time was dedicated to needlework and embroidery, a common and highly valued skill for aristocratic women of the era. Many impressive pieces attributed to Mary and her household still survive today, showcasing her intricate designs, often with symbolic or allegorical meanings, and demonstrating a remarkable level of artistic skill, and you can see one here. Mary also occupied herself with reading, having access to books and often requesting specific titles. Her well-documented intellectual curiosity meant she likely spent hours immersed in texts. To maintain her health and spirits, Mary engaged in exercise, including walking within the castle grounds when permitted, and horseback riding, a lifelong passion that she fought fiercely to continue as often as possible. She also kept pets, particularly her beloved dogs, most famously her Skye Terrier, Geddon, who accompanied her to the scaffold. and at some residences she even maintained an aviary of exotic birds. She learned English during this period, adding to her already impressive linguistic abilities, such as French, Latin, Greek, Italian, Spanish, and Scots. Despite her imprisonment, Mary upheld a degree of royal protocol, overseeing her household of numerous loyal servants and managing her elaborate wardrobe, even sending for patterns and materials from London. She continued to receive and write letters, though these, of course, were heavily censored and often used for clandestine political communication. A dangerous game that ultimately led to her downfall. Regardless of all of these things, Mary's mental health did decline, as anybody's would after so long in captivity. She constantly felt like she was being held against her will and illegally, which of course were both true, and she demanded to meet her cousin Elizabeth, but this never ever took place. And even though Mary was securely imprisoned, she was still considered as a great threat to Elizabeth's reign. Mary was seen as a central figurehead for a relentless series of Catholic plots aimed at overthrowing Elizabeth I and restoring Catholicism to the English throne. These conspiracies, fueled by English Catholic exiles, discontented nobles, and foreign powers like Spain, constantly threatened Elizabeth's precarious reign. Notable among these plots were the Ridolfi plot of 1571, which planned to invade England with Spanish troops and marry Mary to the Duke of Norfolk, and the Throckmorton plot of 1583, another scheme involving a French invasion. Elizabeth's spymaster, Francis Walsingham, meticulously monitored these intricate webs of espionage. The most fatal was the Babington plot of 1586, which explicitly included plans for Elizabeth's assassination. Walsingham's agents cleverly intercepted and deciphered Mary's coded correspondence, revealing her direct approval of the assassination plot. This irrefutable evidence provided Elizabeth with the long-sought pretext to finally put her dangerous cousin on trial, directly leading to Mary's execution. In October of 1586, Mary, Queen of Scots, was put on trial for treason at Fotheringhay Castle. She fiercely denied the charges, asserting her rights as an independent sovereign, but the evidence, particularly her incriminating letters orchestrated by Walsingham, was overwhelming. She was found guilty. The verdict presented Elizabeth I with the most agonising decision of her reign. To execute an anointed queen, her own cousin, was an unprecedented act that could set a dangerous precedent for all European monarchs. For months, Elizabeth hesitated, torn between the dire threat Mary posed and her reluctance to shed royal blood. Finally, under immense pressure from her Privy Council and Parliament, Elizabeth reluctantly signed the death warrant on the 1st of February 1587. 1 week later, on the morning of February the 8th at Fotheringhay Castle, Mary Queen of Scots faced her execution with a composure that transformed her final moments into a powerful act of defiance and martyrdom. Dressed in a black velvet gown, she dramatically shed her outer garments to reveal a crimson underskirt and bodice, symbolising her Catholic faith and evoking the robes of a martyr. Her hands were bound, but she walked steadily to the scaffold erected in the Great Hall, a crucifix clutched in her hand. With a clear, unwavering voice, she proclaimed her innocence of any plot against Elizabeth and declared herself a true martyr for her Catholic faith. She knelt, prayed, and then calmly laid her head on the block. The executioner, unpracticed and nervous, struck the first blow clumsily, missing her neck and wounding the back of her head. A second, equally inefficient stroke followed, causing a piteous cry for Mary. It was only on the third attempt that her head was finally severed from her body. Ugh. Afterwards, when the executioner held her head aloft like this and declared, "God save the Queen," as in God save Elizabeth I, the auburn tresses in his hand turned out to be a wig, and Mary's head fell to the ground, revealing that Mary had very short grey hair by this point. Even more grotesque was the fact that Mary's lips continued to move apparently for 15 more minutes. and her small dog, who had reportedly hidden in her skirts, emerged whimpering and stained with blood, refusing to leave her side. Despite all this gruesomeness, her death cemented her image as a courageous queen who faced her end with unwavering dignity. She died at the age of 44. Mary, Queen of Scots, left behind a legacy as complex and contested as her life. For centuries, she has been depicted as either a romantic heroine, a pious martyr, or a reckless schemer whose passions overshadowed her political judgment. Her story continues to inspire countless books, films, and historical debates. Her son James VI of Scotland would go on to inherit Elizabeth's throne upon her death in 1603, finally uniting the crowns of Scotland and England as James I, fulfilling Mary's ultimate ambition for her lineage. In a striking posthumous reconciliation, James later had his mother's body reinterred in Westminster Abbey, directly opposite the tomb of Elizabeth I, forever linking the two queens in death as they were in life. Mary's turbulent reign and tragic downfall remain a potent symbol of royal vulnerability in an age of religious and political upheaval. She was a woman of strong will and undeniable charisma, whose personal choices and political circumstances conspired to create one of history's most enduring and captivating figures. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the dramatic life of Mary, Queen of Scots. If you found this exploration compelling, please like, share, and subscribe for more dives into the captivating lives that shaped our world.